Hello, welcome to the week 4 information about the assignment. I just want to talk about the data-driven decision-making assignment a bit. The activities that I'm going to have you complete this week will force you to work with either Excel or the spreadsheet feature in Google Docs to do a little bit of manipulation of a data set that I provide to you. In the activity that I'm going to ask you to do independently, it will require that you apply some of these concepts to a data set that I provide, but that you demonstrate competency of them. In the actual, and we're going to do this again next week as well with some additional computations and things that I don't show you how to do this week, so it'll kind of build upon what we do this week and then next week. The data-driven decision-making activity will be a two-part activity where in part 2 you will be required to analyze data. So I want to introduce the assignment to you right now so you can begin thinking about pertinent questions and data and know what it is you need to do, especially since the first part of the assignment is due March 14th. That is the part that does not require you to actually analyze any data, but it does require you to talk about a problem. The second part of the assignment is not due until May 2nd. So we'll take a look at the, I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, sorry about the interruption. We're going to look at the actual assignment here. I know that you have access to it in Blackboard, so I don't want to go through it word for word, but I do want to illustrate some of the key things. The basic premise of the data-driven decision-making activity or assignment is that you come up with meaningful questions that are relative at your particular site that could be addressed in some way by using and analyzing data. So the question or questions that you choose to focus on for this assignment need to be questions that are meaningful, and they also need to be questions that yield more than simply yes or no answers. So I want you to think very carefully about the kinds of question or questions that would be useful to spend some time studying. So that's the first really key item in this whole assignment. You can basically examine any issue that seems relevant to you. It could be a classroom issue, it could be a more general school based issue, but it needs to be something for which the analysis would be meaningful, would be helpful for you to know the answers to the questions that you ask. And then also it's important that the questions you ask are going to be questions for which you will actually be able to gather data necessary to address the questions. It's possible that the data might already exist at your site, so it's just a matter of you getting access to that data. It's possible that the data might be stored in multiple databases. We've read about that over the past couple of weeks where sometimes schools don't always have everything located in the same place. So perhaps you need to get information about ethnicity from one database, but information about performance on some instruments from a different database, and then you compile them into one to run the analysis. It is possible that some of you might need to do a little bit of data collection on your own. Maybe you need to develop a short survey that you ask or administer to students, faculty, parents, whatever it needs to be in order to gather what you need to gather. Eventually you will actually submit the raw data as part of either an Excel file or it could be SPSS for those of you that have had the quantitative research class, or a Google Docs spreadsheet. And so I do want to see the raw data for part 2, not part 1, but again I need for you to know in part 1 how you're going to actually obtain the data. I don't expect that this is going to be a quantitative study as if you were carrying out a thesis. The exploration of the data is going to be meaningful to you and perhaps other people at your site that you'd like to discuss the information with. And I do encourage you to share the information with whoever would be appropriate to share it with. Part one then is going to require you to thoroughly describe the issue. And when I say thorough, I really do mean thorough. So that means you need to fully describe what the problem is. You might need to describe what has already been tried, why do you think it's been unsuccessful. You might need to include data from tables, perhaps a state website or a campus-wide website in the case of those of you who are at higher ed institutions. But you need to really articulate the nature and extent of the current problem to demonstrate that it really is an issue, so that you're not just completing the assignment for the sake of fulfilling a class requirement, but you're actually completing something that is meaningful at a minimum to you. Once you describe the question, then you need to, or the issue, then you need to come up with at least one question, potentially more, that you could actually explore using data that you will collect, and then a plan for how you'll actually obtain the data that you need to collect in order to be able to address the questions you list. And then that will be followed by a description of how you will analyze the data. Not that you will analyze it right now, but are you going to calculate means? Are you going to use filters to be able to isolate data based on various groups? Are you going to create graphs to show comparisons? So over the next 2 weeks in class, I will again demonstrate and have you work on activities that will help you understand how you can manipulate the data using Excel or Google Docs in ways that will help you ultimately complete the data-driven decision-making assignment. Lastly, in part one, will be required a reference list with entries that comply with APA. The scoring rubric is available in Blackboard. You can look at that. And then part two, just to summarize, it will include part one again, which means if I give you constructive feedback on part one, I do expect that you go back and make improvements on it. If you choose not to do that, then it just means that your score for part two will be doubly impacted by what you included in part one, because the scoring rubric for part two does examine the part one components a second time. And then in part two, you will actually analyze the data and report the results. So reporting just means it's factual information, but then after reporting, you will include a section where you generate conclusions based on those results. So what does it mean when you see averages, or what does it mean when you look at the various frequencies? So how would it change what you or others at your site do, for example? So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea about the data-driven decision-making activity so that you can get started thinking about what it is you want to ask and how you'll be able to collect the data that you need to collect. If you wait until the last minute, it's going to put you in a precarious situation, I think, because sometimes the data might be things that other people need to be relied upon in order to get you what you need to know. If you do have questions about the assignment, I think it would be very appropriate to post them in the Q&A link within Blackboard so that other people can see the responses that I provide as well. If it is something that is very specific to the question or questions you want to examine, you can feel free to email me or call me directly as well. But again, the assignment is going to be due in a few more weeks, and if you don't get a start at least thinking about it now, the chances are much higher that the quality of your work will be impacted by that. So over the next week or two, as we begin analyzing some data in various spreadsheet resources, it will give you an idea of what you can do, what are the possibilities, and then hopefully lead to some potential ideas for things that you can do related to your own school site. So let me know if you have any questions.